All right, welcome back everyone. We're going to get started. So Con Edison is our next presentation. Bob Burke is with us. Bob's a section manager at Con Edison responsible for technology and support of engineering. Bob's got a BS in engineering from the College of New Jersey and an MBA from the NYU Stern School of Business. Bob has a background in project management and was recently responsible for the successful implementation of a cross-enterprise drawing management system for over 2,000 users. In addition to making a monthly donation to his local gym, Bob attempts to stay active by chasing around his 2 young children. Please give a warm welcome to Bob Burke.
Beautiful. Thanks, Scott. All right, good morning, everyone. So before I kind of start rolling into this, just wanted to take a moment to thank Synergist, Martha. Last year was my first Adept experience. Very happy to come back this year. Really wonderful to interact with all of you. Learning that you're not alone in this world with all the challenges that we face, and getting that opportunity to kind of bounce ideas off of one another, especially coming off of Todd's presentation just before. I know I can speak for myself and probably for a lot of you that you kind of come away from here with a renewed energy to bring back to your home organization and really kind of enact and be an agent for that transformational change that we've been talking about over the past 2 days. So with no further ado, I guess I'll kind of start rolling through. Scott talked a little bit about myself, so I won't dive too much further into that. But basically, I've been working at Con Ed for about 9 years now. We do support CAD and Adept across the enterprise. So we have 15,000 employees. Not all of them are CAD users, thankfully. But we do support pretty much anywhere where drawings are produced and managed within the company. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what that means for us in a bit as well. Mentioned my darling, wonderful children. I would say that they kind of help me feel young, but I don't think I've ever felt more old in my life. So, but that being said, it's truly the greatest joy of my life. So, talk a little bit about Con Ed as a company. So, Con Ed, we supply electric, steam, and gas to over 10 million New Yorkers. So those are our 3 main commodities. We're also heavily involved in renewables as well, not typically what you think of when you think of your traditional old school utilities, but that is a big part of where we're going. That's a big part of the industry as a whole as well, and that's something that we want to make sure we have a good foothold in also. I talked about supporting over 10 million New Yorkers. We focus as a company on a lot of things, but 2 main ones, right? It's safety, and that's safety for our employees, but also for the public. We deal with very dangerous commodities. All 3 of them are dangerous, or at least can be. And in addition to that, reliability. Very proud. We have an outstanding reliability record, one of the most reliable utilities in the country. But I don't know if you know this about New Yorkers. Incredibly demanding. So there's not a lot of latitude. Quite frankly, we're in a position where as a company, we have a bad day, it's going to end up on the news. And that's really kind of our goal in supporting the enterprise, is to keep us out of the news. So to the extent that we can, I'll kind of keep coming back to this, but mission critical for us, and it's somewhat anecdotal, but think of a technician at 3 in the morning working on trying to troubleshoot a problem. They need access to information, they need it right away, and it better be right. Because they know that as soon as the morning rush comes in, load starts coming up, we need to make sure that everything is tip-top shape and, again, keep ourselves out of the news. So that really kind of segues into why we think engineering information management is quite frankly, really important for us. Without it, and we've heard a lot of stories, we're not immune to it either, you get a lot of islands of information, silos of information that exist. Something as simple as going into a project meeting, you can't afford to spend the first 15 minutes of a project meeting getting on the same page with things as simple as project status. And having good discipline around your engineering information management can really go a long way towards making sure that there's consistency of information, and then there's confidence in that information as well. So for us, we talk about the consistency of that information, but also we want to make sure that and many folks have made reference to this over the course of the past 2 days, as folks tend to leave the company, whether it be through retirement or other means of natural attrition, we want to make sure that their knowledge doesn't completely walk out the door with them, right? And so that's why I have the quote there. If you ever need a good quote, Peter Drucker is a good source for them. We want to make sure that we take information that we have, and as I said before, the technician at 3 in the morning, get that information into his hands or her hands so that they know what to do with it, they can solve problems, and really keep us moving. By show of hands, is there anyone in here whose industry has not experienced any disruption? Right, yeah. So amazingly enough, about 10, 15 years ago, if you had asked someone from my company that question, you could have sat there fat, dumb, and happy with our hand up in the air. Oh, no need to worry for us. But obviously that's not true for us anymore either. Like all of you in this room, we need to find ways to build a better mousetrap. We need to find ways to run our business better, more efficient. And by having, again, good discipline around engineering information management, that really enables us to improve the way that we work and improve that for our end customers as well. So engineering information management is not something that's new to Con Ed. We deployed Adept in December of 2017, but going even back to the 90s, it's something that we recognized as important to us. It started back in the 90s with like many things, a nice homegrown system. And it was great. We had it for 15, 20 years. Folks enjoyed it. It was built and customized specifically for the way that we do business, or the way that we did business, I should say. But like many homegrown systems, it was incredibly reliant upon 1 or 2 architects, the folks who built it, the folks who knew the nuts and bolts of it. It was really not set up in a position for us to enhance it, for us to modify it. And in addition to that, as we started to get closer to the 2010s, I guess I'll say, we recognized that there are some cybersecurity vulnerabilities with it as well. And so in 2012, we actually deployed our first kind of full-scale vendor-supported EIM system. And listen, it was a success. We were able to retire the homegrown system. But one of the things that was done at that point was there really wasn't a lot of consideration for how to do things differently. It was, we have this homegrown system, we have our processes in place. It doesn't matter what this new system we're putting in does, we want to customize it so that it does things exactly the same way that the homegrown system did. And with all that customization, that led to, first of all, incredible cost. It led to difficulty in terms of updating. Even something as simple as an upgrade for that system was incredibly costly, incredibly time-consuming for us. And the third thing, which is probably the biggest driver for us in moving to Adept, was there were some awful performance issues as well. And we believe, it's kind of tough to really pinpoint it, but we believe a lot of that had to do with the customization of the tool. It was hard to troubleshoot it. The vendor themselves were having trouble identifying and pinpointing how to make things better. So with that, I know Anna talked yesterday on the panel about speaking the language of your executives, right? And a lot of times that's dollars and cents, right? So for us, it was a very easy proposition for us. We were able to put together a business case for how putting a new system in place, even though it had only been 4 years at that point that we'd had one, why it made sense for us. And we got that support. We were able to move forward and deploy what would eventually become our instance of Adept. So a little bit about our Adept implementation. We focused on what I'll call like the 3 Ps, right? I know it was mentioned on the panel yesterday. I think you'd mentioned start with people and make sure you're engaging your people. That was very true for us as well. But one thing that I guess I'll kind of add to is that it's important to engage your folks up front, your end users, But you want to make sure you have the right people in the room too. It's not just getting representation from the different groups that you have. You want to make sure you have folks that are engaged, that are going to show up, that are going to voice their opinions. You want to make sure that they know the business well. It sounds simple enough, but something that's important nonetheless. And that they have some influence over the other members of their department also. So, for us, we have, as was mentioned, we have over 2,000 users, representative of 40 different groups. So we're talking about facilities, gas, steam, distribution engineering, substation engineering, transmission engineering, across the enterprise. Not surprisingly, there's a lot of different ways that they do business and that they interact with these drawings. So gathering their input up front was really critical. But perhaps the even bigger challenge was then this next step, was focusing on our processes, right? Saying, we know the type of work that we do, let's look for consistency across the board. Is there opportunity for you in this group here to do things just slightly different to bring you into sync with some of the other groups that we had? And a lot of that was driven to the fact that, as I mentioned before, with our, at that point, existing legacy system, there were so many performance issues from the customization that we wanted to do our best. And we really kind of set our goal to whatever system we put out next would be completely out of the box. We thought it would help us in terms of troubleshooting and all those other things as well. So we had gathered the requirements from our users. We had focused on streamlining our processes a little bit. At that point, it becomes a pretty simple process to say which product is the best fit for it. Also, with a lot of help from some companies in this room, we were able to get confidence in the fact that when we did ultimately select Adept, we were getting not only a product, but a company behind it that would support it. And so many thanks to we reached out to a lot of different groups. Many thanks to a lot of the companies that we spoke to in terms of giving us that confidence as we move forward. So a little bit about our deployment as well. So a couple things that were, I guess, perhaps unique about us. We actually had on-site support from our AC. Nick Bogart was on-site sitting right across the cubicle from me in New York for 6 months. Ate a lot of pizza. It was a really wonderful experience. And for us, that was really valuable. I know someone had asked the question yesterday about resources. How do you apply resources to a deployment? How do you make sure that you have enough people in place? We recognize our folks are busy. They're going to be busy with this new deployment. We could use some support as well. So for us, it was something fortunately we were able to do and have Nick come on site. It was incredibly helpful. And he helped for a couple other things that I'll mention as we go through as well. Also, again, we weren't starting from scratch. We had a legacy system. So the migration of that data was critical for us as well. We have over 1 million records, and they go back 50 and 60 years in some cases, and any single one of those drawings could be critical at a moment's notice. So not only did we need to make sure we migrated over, but it had to be 100% spot on. So many thanks to the team, Russell Reese, and I know Todd was involved as well in terms of that custom migration. A lot of a heavy lift, but we were able to get there, which was great. And the last piece, which is kind of how we focused on training, was we had Nick actually train the trainer sessions for us as well. So again, talking about re-engaging with your people, right? Get their input up front. You want to circle back to them throughout the process as well. Those are the folks, those are our advocates that we had identified, and we had Nick basically turn them into Adept trainers for their groups. And that was incredibly helpful because there's no allowance for downtime for us, right? We shut down the system on, I think it was technically Thursday evening. We got Friday in, that was great. And then by Monday morning when they came back in, we were up. And that was critical for us. So having those kind of local SMEs dispersed throughout the organization was really critical for us. And that, training, I'll be honest, that's something that we still continue to struggle with. We still want to, improve upon that. That's, I think, our biggest bugaboo in terms of what we need to work on as an organization. But this kind of gave us a good foundation framework and gave us some good advocates out throughout the organization. So to talk a little bit about the benefits that we realized. First off, I talked performance. So before, and this is going to sound crazy to some folks, but something as simple as approving a package of drawings would take upwards of an hour, 2 hours. You click the button, you have to walk away from your machine, you lose patience. After going to Adept, seconds. So that was obviously right off the bat. Nobody likes change, but when you can at least point to something that was a significant pain point for our users and say that problem is now gone, it helps the adoption curve a little bit. In addition to that, the product's intuitive in terms of search. So the quote I have here, which I'll ad-lib a little bit and add my own editorialization. I didn't watch the training information and materials that you spent a lot of time and hard effort working on. I'm going to ask you questions anyway, in the coming days, and probably forget that it's even there. But nonetheless, after putzing around on the system for just a few minutes, our engineers, our designers were able to find the information they were looking for. So that speaks a lot to me to the intuitive nature of the search. And the last piece is adaptability, right? We recognize that, boy, we gathered input from our users up front and we did our best to gather those requirements, but there's almost no way we were going to hit a home run the first time. We're going to have opportunities for improvement, and we want to have a system that gives us that flexibility to move forward and make those changes as we see fit. And obviously, we certainly do have that as well. So for us, what's next? We are on the doorstep of putting live an Adept Integrator effort that we've been working on for a few months now. And basically, Charlie's laughing. But basically, the first phase of that is dealing with GIS mapping and other kind of visual representations that our end users use on a daily basis. So folks in transmission operations are using mapping tools. We want to be able to give them the opportunity that when they're out on site, they click on a link, it brings them to the relevant drawing for where they are. So that locational context is something that we're going to be delivering to them, hopefully within the next couple weeks, I think is when we're going to be able to go live with that. And kind of next steps in terms of integrator, we're also hopeful that as we kind of segue from, we have things like asset management and work management for our field forces, but we're actually also developing engineering work management, which is something that's new for us as an organization as well. And we have a tool that's somewhat customized for our business there again, so don't always learn our lessons, I guess. But we want to be able to tie that tool in as well so that, engineers working on a deliverable, when they're completed with that deliverable, that'll trigger an instance where it's created in Adept. We route it for approval. It's stored there. You can access it from either system. So those are kind of the visionary things that we have going on, and Adept Integrators. Jean and team are going to talk about that a little bit next, I believe. But that's some of the things that we're really excited about. We recognize not everyone's going to be an expert Adept user. So if you can bring the information that they're looking for into the systems that they're already using, and with just a click of a button, be able to bring it to their desktop. That's important and it's valuable for us. We're also looking to upgrade. Message received, as you talked about getting us on most recent versions. Originally we were thinking 2018, now we're maybe thinking 2019, we'll see. But that's something that's going to be coming up in the coming months for us as well. And the last piece, which I think is really, really important for our kind of future of the tool, is a concept that I'll call Adept governance, right? And we've kind of got the seeds of that starting right now for us. That's kind of multifaceted, right? We recognize that, again, feedback from users is important, but we can't close the door on that. We need to make sure that we're keeping our ears open for our user bases, especially since they're wide. We don't want them to go and solve problems on their own, I think, as was mentioned yesterday. But that's also an opportunity for them to share best practices with how they use the tool within the company as well. And so that we see that as an opportunity. We also are tying that into ongoing continuous training. So Teresa Lau, who's here with me from my team, if you talk about what are some of the keys to a good implementation, you can't hire her, but if you can get yourself a Teresa Lau, that goes a long way towards having a successful implementation. I will say that. And yeah, that's right. Thanks. So Teresa and team have been conducting monthly Adept Forums for folks, both in person and through WebEx. And I think we've gone through 2 at this point, 3, 2. And they've been incredibly helpful as well. Fortunately or unfortunately, it helps us identify the fact that there's still a big gap for some of our users. And it's our effort to try and, one of our efforts to try and close that gap. So again, for us, it all comes back to getting that information in the hands of the right person at the right time. So when we have our technician out there, we want his confidence or her confidence that when they go and they look for a document, or if they click on a link in the system that they're using, that they're going to be able to bring up what they need. They'll use that information to solve the problem for us. They'll keep us out of the news. Right? So with that, I'll open for any questions.
So Bob, with your users being technicians that are out in the field, how are they? What means of connectivity are they using? Do they have laptops, et cetera?
Yeah, tough books, and a lot of times they'll have MiFis that kind of go with it to be able to access. They'll VPN into our network. It's all inside the firewall, but they are accessing typically through tough books.
Thank you. The people work on the side. Do you like them to use a adaptive viewer to do the right-line markup?
Yeah, I think that's a good opportunity for us. There's still a lot of comfort, I'll say, with printing something out and marking it up physically, sending it back to the office and having someone actually bring it in. I think there's been, I can't say if it's been used minimally heavily, but I know that it's not used universally, and I think that is an opportunity for us as we move forward to kind of really leverage the tool a little bit deeper. The as-built process sounds like it's a pain point for a lot of folks in this room. It's a pain point for us too, making sure that we get accurate and timely as-builts in, and that's critical to operating our system, safely and reliably, like our mission is. So, I think moving towards that is something that we really do want to focus on as we move forward and kind of develop and mature in our use of Adept.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone's hungry, I think.
So I wanted you to talk a little bit more about the Adept Forum, stuff that you do with your groups. I mean, how many people, what do you feel kind of really engages them kind of thing and opens them up more? Yeah,
so we do not put a limit. We kind of opened those forums up to anyone and everyone who is interested in attending. We've been trying, although unsuccessfully, to record them as well, for posterity purposes, and so that when someone can't attend, they can still gather input. But I think for me, if we can identify groups that can use a little more help, kind of doing road shows like many of the folks in this room have talked about, I think that's something that we're going to be looking to do as well in the coming months and next year as well. We've got a lot of great talent on our team, and we want to be able to help our users, develop themselves as well, which should hopefully in turn free us up to work on more value-added things also. So.
I just have real quick, how do you engage your users? I've tried forum before. I sat in a room all day long and no one came with a question. How do you engage your people?
Yeah. I think it's still fresh for the users, because as we've mentioned, we've done it for the past 2 months now. So at this point, it's still fresh, but I think we noticed with our previous system, we've done similar type of efforts to try and get folks up to speed, and interest will wane, right? So I think that's something we need to keep an eye on. Right now, the attendance is strong. We don't have that issue. We have full rooms and lots of folks on web, attending and engaged and asking questions. But if we do see that start to wane a little bit, I think that's time to kind of change up the formula a little bit, right? And it's kind of a tricky answer, and I'm not really answering it, but For us, it's not something that we're experiencing now, but maybe taking a more proactive approach of reaching out to folks and getting at their staff meetings and that sort of thing, I think is one of those opportunities.
Set of users. Are there areas of the company that haven't been in scope that in maybe the next 3 to 5 years you might consider?
One very small group that I have been bugging for a while. It's not a big group, but on our Steam distribution side, they have been using another tool, I'll say. And that's something that I think I'm hopeful within the next year we'll be able to bring them into the fold as well. But for the majority of folks, we were able to kind of have them as part of our initial push out. And I didn't really mention it in terms of next steps, but we want to expand to a lot more than just engineering documents as well, to the extent that we can. For us, technically it's not hard, right? But making sure that the information as it's coming in is consistent and that folks will be able to find it afterwards. That's kind of working on that process I think is probably the trickier part.
When you talk about processes, did you have a team that worked on trying to refine some of the processes before going into Adept?
So we had our user base that we were gathering feedback from in terms of what the requirements were, and they were also the ones that were helping us identify what those processes were. That was one of the areas that Nick helped out a lot in helping make those design decisions as we went through designing. I think we have two workflows. Is that what we? So with 2,000 users and 2 workflows. So that's something that I think we were pretty successful on saying, here's the commonality. We made it simple enough that it applied to everyone while still being adaptable so that they felt like they were having their needs met as well.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question about your workflow. You said right now you have 2 workflows, so how many steps you have in the workflow?
How many steps? Two steps?
Right. So we have, prior to that, we used to have multiple approvals.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to refine the processes that really how many approvals do you really need? And if we only have if it's like a Rev 0, we only need 4, and if it's any other, Rev 2. I mean, two approvals. So we made the workflows flexible enough that you can do at least 2 to as many approvals as you need.
Okay, thank you. I have another question about the Adept Integrator. So you mentioned right now your company working on the Adept Integrator implementation project, right? So can you explain to us a little bit more? You Adept integrate with SAP or SharePoint?
For us, it's yeah. Thank you. Good question. So for us, the first step is call them mapping solutions, right? Mapping or visual representations of information. So again, we have a tool that our transmission engineers use. It's a different scenario. And there's a visual representation of our feeder maps. There's icons that are added to those maps that can lead to leak reports or manufacturer's drawings. They can kind of bring you to whatever type of information is relevant to where you're looking at on a locational basis. And the ability for those folks to be able to click through and just say, okay, show me the scan that we have in Adept of this transmission joint, for example, and it'll bring it up for them at a moment's notice. Again, it's helped with navigation, right? It ultimately what we're striving for in this first one is, you don't need to know drawing number, you don't need to know the information on the title block, you don't need to know really what to search for. You're going to click on it and you're going to be able to bring it up because someone who, the SMEs who are knowledgeable enough about that have already linked to that drawing.
Thank you.
All right. One more?
Hi, Bob. Bernardo from Evonik. Which out-of-the-box feature was the aha moment for your users? Because we've been discussing how change or how resistant people can be to change. So what was the most talked about out-of-the-box feature that perhaps improved the adoption of the system within your organization?
So really, for me, I think it's much less a feature and just generally speaking, the difference in performance from the previous system to Adept. You know, again, folks are going to be resistant to change, as you mentioned, but if you can tell them that you're no longer going to have to click a button and go to get a cup of coffee to do a simple task, that helps. It goes a long way. So.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Bob. Awesome. Appreciate it.